Good morning and welcome to IU Sports Sunday on this Thanksgiving weekend Sunday, I guess. We're about 5 days away from Thanksgiving, and there's a bit of a lull in the revenue sports for Indiana University, but we've still got plenty to talk about. Nick Rotacap here with you. Once again, the sun is shining quite brightly into my face here in the WGCL studio, but because it's usually cloudy and gray in late November, I am certainly not going to complain. First on the docket is Indiana men's soccer. They are beginning NCAA tournament play today. The Hoosiers earned the number 6 national seed, which means they host at least the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. So when the bracket came out, it was announced that they would face the winner of Kentucky and St. Louis, both teams that they met in the regular season, and the Billikens beat Kentucky in overtime here in Bloomington on Thursday. So Indiana gets to host St. Louis, 2 of the winningest NCAA men's soccer programs of all time, going head-to-head at noon today at Bill Armstrong Stadium. And this is an Indiana men's soccer team that kind of struggled in Big Ten play, which was unusual for them, of course. So many Big Ten titles, nearly 20 in the regular season all time. But Indiana was number 1 when conference play began just over 2 months ago, and the Hoosiers struggled. They were upset by Michigan on opening night in Big Ten play and ultimately finished the regular season in league play 5-5, but they had such a strong non-conference resume that included a home tie with then number 9 Clemson, a win over number 14 Oregon State, a win over St. Louis in the regular season as well, a win over Notre Dame. So Indiana's resume was good enough. I went over number 25 Kentucky as well. The resume was good enough for the Hoosiers to still earn a national seed, which means that they get to host the first couple rounds of the NCAA tournament, and they get a much more favorable draw when it comes to trying to get back to the College Cup, which, of course, is the men's soccer equivalent and women's soccer equivalent as well. It's basically the College Soccer Final Four, which is held in Cary, North Carolina, in mid-December, and the Hoosiers still chasing that elusive 9th national championship, which has been so close to their grasp. So close, but just never quite close enough. You think back to 2022, which was my freshman year. Indiana lost to Syracuse on penalty kicks, and that was a particularly bad heartbreaker. The year after that, I believe, was the year Indiana lost to Notre Dame in penalty kicks. Last year, they lost to Denver. Denver was a juggernaut last season. You think about the 2020 season, which was played in spring of 21. They lost to Marshall in penalty kicks. So Indiana still questing for that 9th national championship. And these 2 teams, Indiana and St. Louis, facing off at noon today at Bill Armstrong Stadium. You can catch that game on ESPN+. My friends in the media school will have the call. I believe it's Andrew Hilsman and Zach Browning on the call. So I hope that they enjoy the experience. These teams, the winningest 2 as far as national championships go. St. Louis has 8, which is the most of any men's soccer team. Indiana has 8, of course, as well. St. Louis with 10, Indiana with 8. And these teams met in the regular season, and Indiana won 1-0. And St. Louis, it did not come easily for them getting by Kentucky. They trailed until the 88th minute. But a goal from freshman Jack DiMaria sent the game in overtime, and, of course, golden goal in the postseason in men's soccer, and DiMaria scored the game winner in the 104th minute. The Billikens are unbeaten in their last 11 matches, and we'll see if Indiana can break that streak this afternoon. It's always fun, postseason soccer in Bloomington. It seems to have become a yearly thing. Of course, the standard of excellence established by Jerry Yeagley and now being carried on by Todd Yeagley here in Bloomington. So best of luck to Indiana men's soccer as they begin NCAA tournament play today. First time in a long time that they missed the Big Ten tournament. Of course, the conference changing the format a little bit. So it was the top 4 teams that got in, and Indiana was the 5th place team at the end of the regular season. On decision day, the Hoosiers beat Rutgers 5-0, and then they needed some help. They needed Washington to beat UCLA and knock the Bruins out of contention, and, well, Washington led 2-1 with about 20 minutes left and then gave up 3 unanswered goals as UCLA got the back door into the Big Ten tournament, knocked off top-seeded Maryland, and then beat Michigan in the championship game to win the conference title. So the Bruins traveled all the way across the country and came away with a Big Ten trophy, but of course that all is irrelevant now because Everybody is looking to be the last team standing in Cary, North Carolina, when all is said and done. And for Indiana men's soccer, they are led by Palmer Alt, the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, who will probably win the Mac Hermann Trophy as well, which is given to the nation's top college soccer player. Palmer Alt leading the NCAA. 16 goals, 10 assists. That's good for 42 points. And Alt, the first Division I player to eclipse 15 goals and 10 assists in the same season since 2017. Palmer Alt transferred in from Butler, and he has been more than adequate at filling the shoes of Tommy Mahalik, who used to wear that number 10 on the back of his jersey. It went to Palmer Alt, and he has been phenomenal, leading the Hoosiers to their 50th NCAA tournament appearances. And you just look at the numbers behind this are absurd. It's become so normal. I mean, they've made the Final Four, which is the College Cup as it is now, 22 of those 50 times. That's an NCAA record. They've made the national title match 17 times. That's an NCAA record. It's absurd. They've appeared in 39 straight NCAA tournaments, and no other program at the Division I level has a streak longer than 9 seasons. So nearly or over 4 times as long. It's categorically insane, the standard of excellence that Indiana men's soccer has set, but Todd Yeagley would not be surprised by their performances year in and year out. Neither would any of the players, because that is the standard to which they hold themselves. So that game kicking off at noon today at Bill Armstrong Stadium. It'll be on ESPN Plus, not Big Ten Plus. ESPN Plus at noon, but it'll be crewed by the folks that usually work our Big Ten Plus broadcasts here in Bloomington. I am not among them, but still holding out for Indiana to host the second round, so that way I can get one of those games, hopefully. That would be, or I guess it would be the third round because they're a national seed. Anyway, still a chance, but I'm not going to complain because I've gotten some pretty cool games on Big Ten Plus. Here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. As far as other teams in action this weekend, volleyball hosted number 1 Nebraska yesterday, and the Huskers still the nation's best. Still the nation's best as far as college volleyball is concerned. Indiana volleyball certainly much better this year than they've been in the recent past. They've kind of been building over the last few years, at least in the time that I've been here. Steve Aird had to reconstruct this program from the ground up, did the Indiana head coach. And the Hoosiers in the top 20, hosting number 1 Nebraska yesterday. Nebraska fans traveled well, as they always do. They took over Wilkinson Hall, and one of my friends on the call, Ian Plaskoff, told me that it was like a Dallas Cowboys level seat rush. Wilkinson Hall, general admission, I should say. The moment gates opened, Big Red fans filled up the place. And Nebraska swept Indiana to clinch the Big Ten title outright. The Huskers have dropped one set. Their volleyball team has dropped one set since September 1st. One set. They are 28-0. They have not lost a match all season long. They have only been taken to 5 sets once, and that was by Kentucky on August 31st. Nebraska had no problem handling Indiana here in Bloomington, so the Huskers have won the Big Ten outright, but still, Indiana volleyball very much in contention to get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. They are 22-6 on the season, and they have set a new program record for wins in Big Ten play with 13. So a hat tip to Steve Aird and what he has done with this program. It seems like they are really putting it together this year, and you've kind of seen flashes over the last few years. They just missed the NCAA tournament last year, but with 2 matches to go, both on the road at Illinois and Purdue, with the regular season concluding next Saturday, Indiana is certainly in position to make the NCAA tournament for the first time in 15 years. And this is an NCAA tournament resume. Indiana finally beat Penn State. I mean, the Nittany Lions had never lost to Indiana in-state college. It almost sounds like football, where Indiana has won just 3 times. But the Penn State Nittany Lions lost to Indiana volleyball for the first time ever back in early November. That was a resume-boosting win for the Hoosiers, and they also went out to the West Coast and knocked off USC and UCLA, both of whom were ranked at the time. So good on Indiana volleyball. Just came up short against Nebraska yesterday, but all 28 of Nebraska's opponents can say the same as well. Nobody has cracked the code on the Huskers just yet. So, as far as football and basketball go, well, basketball was in action earlier this week, and they'll be in action again on Tuesday. And I'll tell you what, they're undefeated, and that much is true. But a lot of question marks, I think, around this team. Some of the things that we kind of were anticipating to be problematic, well, they probably will be problematic as the strength of schedule ramps up. And I'll tell you what those things are on the other side of this break. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you, and I said before the break, well, there's something concerning about Indiana men's basketball, and we've seen this manifest in back-to-back games against Incarnate Word and Lindenwood. Not exactly world beaters there. I've covered both of these games, I've called both of these games, and I tell you, they feel almost identical in retrospect. 7 days ago, Indiana took on Incarnate Word and won 69-61. The Hoosiers almost conceded what would have been a 16-point comeback? It would have been a very ugly collapse. Incarnate Word cut it to 2 possessions at one point after trailing by nearly 20 points. Indiana, 5 of 24 from three-point range. That is 21% against Incarnate Word. That was on Sunday. And then against Lindenwood on Thursday, just earlier this week. At the time, it was 7 days before Thanksgiving, winning 73-53. And you're thinking, well, how is that the same as how is that the same as an 8-point win at home? Well, Indiana 9 of 28 from 3. That's 32%. So only about 11 percentage points better from downtown. But both felt very uninspired, and the quotes from the players and head coach Darren DeVries were very similar after both games. They felt like when the shots were not falling, the energy was lacking. Tucker DeVries said on Thursday after Indiana beat Lindenwood that they came out flat. His exact quote was, well, it's pretty obvious we came out flat. And he's not one to mince words. And in both instances, it was Sam Alexis, the Florida transfer, who is the first man off the bench. Indiana's only true post player, standing at 6'9". He's not really a traditional big man, but he is somebody who spends most of his time in the paint, and he's got a lot of dunks. I feel like probably 75% of his made baskets this year have been dunks. But Sam Alexis was the common denominator when it comes to bringing the energy, bringing the intensity, especially on the defensive end of the floor. He is a pest. Alexis had 4 of Indiana's 5 blocks against Lindenwood in 24 minutes off the bench. He also added 8 points and 10 rebounds. So it's concerning because this is an Indiana team that we saw in its first 3 games, averaging 99 points per game and eclipsing triple digits twice and raining down threes. One of the nation's best three-point shooting teams, Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries, both over 50% from downtown. It was a very small sample size, but you're thinking, okay, this team could be pretty fun to watch. And then over the last couple of games, not just in those 2 games has Indiana been very poor shooting the basketball, but Indiana's been very poor against inferior competition, vastly inferior competition. Incarnate Word barely topped 200 in KenPom, and at the time that Lindenwood came to town earlier this week, Indiana beat them by 20, but it didn't feel that way. And Lindenwood is one of the 30 worst teams out of 365 per KenPom. In layman's terms, the computers say that these teams are very bad. And Indiana seemingly has played down to its competition, has played to its opponent's level over the last couple of games. And, maybe this is small sample size again, but it's concerning that these games have felt almost identical. And I don't know that you can get away with playing down to your level of competition and coming out flat and being lackadaisical when it comes to rebounding the ball. I mean, Lindenwood actually out-rebounded Indiana 48-44 on Thursday. And I don't know that you can really ever make an excuse for getting out-rebounded by a team like Lindenwood, which just completed the transition to the Division I level. So Indiana going to have to figure it out soon because Kansas State comes to town on Tuesday. And Kansas State much better than Lindenwood or Incarnate Word as far as strength of competition is concerned. Lindenwood, not exactly a world beater, like I said, but Kansas State 5-1, coming off of a 1-point loss to Nebraska in the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City, Missouri. That was on Friday. But K-State will be here on Tuesday night, and this is a team that has been more consistently raining down the points. You look at their totals: 91 points in a loss against Mizzou, 93 points against UNC Greensboro, 98 against Bellarmine, 99 against Cal, 84 against Tulsa, 98 against Mississippi State, 85 against Nebraska. This team can score, and I think that's putting it very lightly. And the thing that kind of worries me if I'm Indiana is the consistency. That consistency is what Indiana has struggled with, because when Indiana does not shoot the three well, at least through 5 games, when the three-pointer is not falling, they really don't have anything to fall back on. They just kind of chuck it up there and hope that it works. And when it doesn't work, it's just like, okay, well, what are we going to do? So far, Indiana's been able to eke out these wins, and I say eke out because, again, a 20-point win against Lindenwood did not feel convincing. It did not feel like a 20-point win. I said on Twitter after the game, you can follow me at Nick Rodecap, NickRodecap. It felt like the least convincing 20-point win I've ever seen. It did. And, I mean, you look at the shooting numbers for Indiana as a team, and I think that bears it out. Indiana shooting just 38% from the floor and 32% from three, missing 7 free throws. Tucker DeVries made 5 of Indiana's 9 3-point field goals. No other Indiana player made more than 1. Lamar Wilkerson, who began the season shooting about 55% through 3 games, 1 of 7 from 3-point range and 4 of 16 from the floor. Wilkerson missed his first 6 3-point field goal attempts. And you look at this on a game-by-game basis for Wilkerson, the Sam Houston State transfer. Wilkerson in his first 2 games was 10 of 20. And then he was 15 of 26 from 3-point range through 3 games. Over his last 2, Wilkerson is 1 of 10 from 3-point range, and he's made just 6 of 22 field goal attempts, scoring 19 points over that span, after averaging 22 points through his first 3 games. So that is the concerning thing, because Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries are going to be Indiana's most called upon scorers this year. And fortunately for Indiana, Tucker DeVries has kind of taken over in a couple of these games. You think about the Marquette game where he had 27 points, 24 in the first half alone. DeVries, 25 points against Lindenwood. Nobody else had more than 10, and that was Wilkerson. So the concern is, okay, the shot selection is poor because a lot of Indiana's missed threes, as I recall from broadcasting the game, a lot of Indiana's missed threes were just kind of, let's chuck it up and maybe it falls. It was poor shot selection. And the fortunate thing is that Lindenwood was even worse at shooting the basketball. 25% from the floor, 17% from 3, including 3 of 18 from 3-point range, and 0 of 10 from beyond the arc in the first half. So you can get away with poor shot selection when the other team is even worse. And that is kind of the good thing for Indiana, is that the defense was good enough. It's kind of been the common denominator over these last 2 games. Offense is terrible, the defense is good, and it picks up the slack. But the rebounding, the effort was bad. A lot of coaches talk about how rebounding is an effort stat. And Daniel Flick, fantastic writer, senior in the media school, asked Tucker DeVries and Sam Alexis the question of rebounding being an effort stat. You know, how do you guys kind of evaluate that? How do you handle that, knowing that you were a little flat? And, well, the players said that it was actually a focal point, bringing energy over the last couple days prior to Thursday's game against Lindenwood in practice. And it just didn't translate to the game. And again, against Kansas State, a team that has been seemingly scoring 90 points a night, pretty much at will, 92.8 points per game for Kansas State through 6 games. I don't know that you're going to be able to get away with that same lack of effort on Tuesday night when the Wildcats come to town at 8 p.m. Kansas State led by preseason All-American P.J. Haggerty, who is averaging 28 points per game on 56% shooting. Haggerty, I feel like this guy has been everywhere. P.J. Haggerty, the star player for Kansas State, 6'4" guard, listed as a junior. He's a 3-time transfer, PJ Haggerty. Began his career at TCU, then went to Tulsa, then went to Memphis. And now he's back at a school that wears purple and white, just like TCU, in Kansas State. Haggerty actually declared for the NBA draft last year, or I guess earlier this year, went to the NBA draft combine, and then withdrew from the draft process in late May and transferred to Kansas State. So how's this guy going to have a degree? When you're playing at 4 different schools over the course of 4 years, how are you going to graduate with a degree? Because I can't imagine those credits transfer very well from place to place, especially when you're going from Texas Christian to Tulsa to Memphis, now to K-State. To his credit, at least he's staying in the same part of the country. But at some point, if you transfer 3 times, the school probably isn't the problem. So this Kansas State team probably looking at Indiana and licking their chops and saying, man, if we're gonna face a team that doesn't really get up for its opponents at home, then, man, we're going to have a great time at Assembly Hall on Tuesday night, especially considering the atmosphere probably isn't going to be very good. And the atmosphere hasn't been very good, really, for any Indiana men's basketball games at Assembly Hall this year. And part of that, I think most of it, has to do with the caliber of competition that Indiana's faced at home. Not talking about Marquette, not talking about Louisville or Kentucky coming up, not talking about Kansas State on Tuesday either. I'm talking about Alabama A&M and Milwaukee and Incarnate Word and Lindenwood. These teams aren't exactly big draws. Maybe Kansas State will be more of a draw just because of the name recognition and because of the caliber of opponent that Indiana's facing. But I would counter that. By saying that it's Thanksgiving break and the students are gone. My student housing facility, a lot of cars dressed as parking spaces right now. Everybody's home with their families. I don't know that many students are going to come back to Bloomington for this game. So I can't wait for the inevitable Indiana basketball attendance problem discourse that will take place, because it's probably going to happen. And K-State probably will take advantage of that and keep it close or maybe even win against Indiana. But I do think that the Hoosiers playing to their level of competition is concerning, because you'd like to see some level of consistency. And the problem with Indiana being a team that relies so heavily on outside shooting is that when the shots don't fall, you'd like to be able to just get it in down low to a big guy and let him go to work. But they don't really have that true big. Closest they have is Sam Alexis, and he's 6'9", 240. In the Big Ten, you're going to be facing guys who are 6'10", 6'11", 7-footers even. I mean, Purdue's got Oscar Clough, who is just a mountain of a man. Clough, the South Dakota State transfer. Purdue, as usual, going to work early in the season. Blew out Texas Tech a couple days ago. But it just kind of concerns me with teams that are constructed a little more traditionally when Indiana is such a small team. I memean, yeah, Reed Bailey's 6'10", but he's only 6'10", 230. He doesn't play like a big. He plays like I even hesitate to say he plays like a power forward. He doesn't play as aggressively as you'd like someone of his size to play. And it leads me to think that there is a flaw, and we kind of thought about this. We considered this when it was announced, Indiana's roster. We kind of considered that this team was flawed in its roster construction because, for all the crap that Mike Woodson got, and deservedly so, for playing 2 bigs, at least he had big men on the roster, And I'm not going to say that he utilized them perfectly, because he didn't, and I think any Indiana basketball fan would tell you the same. But at least he had bigs on the roster. Darren DeVries didn't really bring in a big man. Reed Bailey's not a big man. He's 6'10", but he does not play like a big. And Reed Bailey kind of splitting time with Sam Alexis. I thought that Bailey was going to be better, at least right now, his early returns. Not as good as I think a lot of people were expecting for a guy who's 6'10". I mean, he's averaging 10 points a game, but he's not getting that many minutes. Sam Alexis is actually getting more minutes than he is. Bailey averaging 10.6 points per game and 3.6 rebounds per game. For a guy who's 6'10", it just seems kind of underwhelming. And Bailey has scored in double figures just twice. 13 points combined over his last 2 games. He's only played 29 minutes total. So it would not surprise me if Sam Alexis gets the start at the 5 position against Kansas State on Tuesday night, because Alexis has been playing with more intensity, more effort, more passion, and he's been straight up better. he's been better. He's been more productive inside. He's a defensive nightmare for opposing teams. He's just so high energy, and you can tell it. Tucker DeVries said it after the game. You can tell Sam Alexis loves playing the game of basketball. I'd rather have a guy who's averaging 11 points and 7 rebounds a game, nearly twice as many boards, than Reed Bailey, who's averaging about 10 and 3.5 rebounds per game. So Alexis, again, it would not surprise me if he gets the starting spot at the center position over Reed Bailey on Tuesday night, because he's the guy who's been the common denominator when it comes to Indiana bringing the intensity. When the team has been flat, Sam Alexis has been energetic, and that is really good to see. Sam Alexis, of course, a national champion last year at Florida, playing for Todd Golden, bringing that same standard to Indiana, regardless of the opponent. But Kansas State, that ratchets up the level of competition, especially because I don't think Marquette is actually that good. So this Kansas State team is going to be Indiana's first test at Assembly Hall this year on Tuesday night. No, by the way, that's on my birthday. I'll have the call on WIUX 99.1 on your FM dial here in Bloomington, student radio for IU. And it's going to be a fun opportunity to call that game. I've never called a game on my birthday before, but I'm excited because this Kansas State team, led by PJ Haggerty, is going to be a good challenge for Indiana men's basketball. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. Thanks so much for joining us on this penultimate Sunday in November, which, wow, that is weird to say because that means I'm almost halfway through my senior year, which is kind of scary. But time flies when you're having fun, and I'll tell you, nobody's having more fun than Indiana football right now. Picked a heck of a week to go on by when the SEC schedules their usual cupcakes. Texas A&M playing the 1-10 Samford Bulldogs. Yeah, real world beaters there down in College Station. Indiana on a bye. The Hoosiers 11-0, still going to be number 2 in the college football playoff rankings on Tuesday. The teams around them, well, there's only one that's relevant for the purpose of the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State blew out Rutgers 42-9. Nobody's surprised. Julian Sayin played 3 quarters, I think. 13-19, 157 yards, 2 touchdowns. Run-of-the-mill, expected. The attention now turns to rivalry week. And before we go there, I will just say Oregon handled USC yesterday. 42-27 at Autzen Stadium, and USC's defense continuing to struggle. It turns out it is hard for a road team to win at Autzen Stadium. Who knew? Not hard for Indiana. They did it. Became the first team in 3 years to do it. And the Hoosiers took down the Ducks. It was about 6 weeks ago now. That was in mid-October. Still, for my money, the best win in college football this season. But we will now shift our focus to rivalry week. And rivalry week, very chaotic. Anything can happen, and it usually does. Indiana gets a head start, playing on Black Friday, 7:30 p.m. in 5 days' time at Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette to take on the lowly Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue has not beaten a Power 4 team since November 25th, 2023, which some of you may recognize as the last game of Tom Allen's tenure. 35-31, Purdue over Indiana. That's the last time Purdue beat a Power Conference team. The Boilers 0-8 in Big Ten play again this year after going 0-9 last year. 2-9 overall under first-year head coach Barry Odom, who took over for the fired Ryan Walters. Walters, who is now the defensive coordinator at Washington. Purdue really on the struggle bus again this year. The Boilers, not a whole lot to write home about. I mean, they have lost now 9 straight games since beating Southern Illinois 34-17 back in week number 2, and they have nothing offensively right now. Ryan Brown, who was the starting quarterback when the season began, has been benched. He was very subpar. Didn't get a lot of help from his receivers, but he's been replaced by Malachi Singleton. Singleton has been running the offense the last couple of games. Singleton, a sophomore out of Kennesaw, Georgia, played in a couple games last year and has taken over this year. Took over in mid-October. But Singleton leading this Purdue offense that has become even more one-dimensional than usual with the loss of Devin Mockabee. Mockabee suffered a season-ending injury earlier this year, and you feel for him because Mockabee, a former walk-on who stuck it out through 2 coaching changes, unfortunately not getting the chance to finish his final season at Purdue. He could have transferred, but he didn't. He chose to stay in West Lafayette, and I respect that. For as much as I dog on West Lafayette, it stinks that Mockabee was injured. But that makes Purdue's rushing offense even more limited than they already are. Mockabee led the team 500-plus rushing yards. No other player has gotten to more than 300. And the receivers struggle with drops. I watched Purdue play against Illinois a little over a month ago. That was one of the first things that stuck out to me. The rushing offense was actually okay for Purdue, but a lot of wide-open receivers just couldn't catch. The passes from Ryan Brown. Brown also got sacked a few times, and against Illinois, that Purdue secondary looked really bad. Really bad. You think about the way Indiana shut down Luke Altmaier and Illinois star wide receiver Hank Beatty. At the time, one of the more lauded quarterback wide receiver combos in the country. And, well, Altmaier and Beatty both finished the day with career highs in passing and receiving yards, respectively. So that gives you an idea of how poor Purdue's secondary is. Now, Illinois yesterday losing to Wisconsin. And, I give a lot of credit. To Wisconsin because Luke Fickell and his team, they're not eligible for a bowl game. 7 losses. And they're still fighting. And I give them a lot of credit for that. Illinois fell at Camp Randall Stadium to Wisconsin yesterday, 27-10. So if you're keeping score at home, that's 2 ranked wins in 3 weeks for Wisconsin. They beat Washington, fell to Indiana, and then went back home and beat Illinois. Both Washington and Illinois ranked in the bottom part of the top 25. And Wisconsin beat Illinois 27-10. Altmaier struggled, 21 of 35 for 248 yards, no touchdowns. So Illinois, another case study as to why preseason polls are so useless, because they are going to end the season in all likelihood unranked, will the Illini. So, preseason polls, I think we need to abolish them. I don't think anybody should be ranked until week 4, I would say. I get it. We need preseason polls because of storylines and narratives and whatnot. And networks need to put the small numbers next to teams' names to make the matchups look more appealing, but come on. Illinois was a preseason top 15 team. Preseason top 10, if memory serves, because they were number 9 when they came to Bloomington and got boat raced by Indiana, 63-10. Can you believe people doubted Indiana after that game? The goalposts got moved from, oh, wow, what an impressive win, to, how good really is Illinois? Because people refuse to give Indiana credit for anything. And I think there's still a subset of people that refuse to give Indiana credit for anything. Just keep winning. That's what I'd say to Indiana. But Illinois looked like world beaters against Purdue, and it's a long-winded way of saying that this game might not be 66-0 Indiana, but it could be 52-0, 52-3, something like that. It is going to be ugly at Ross-Ade Stadium. Preliminary forecast check. If you think back to last year's game, the Bucket game here in Bloomington, it was a snow globe at Memorial Stadium. As I recall, the feels like temperature, which I think is a load of phooey, because the air temperature is what it is. I don't think feels like is really a good way to measure things, but as I recall, the feels like temperature at kickoff last year was in single digits. And the air temperature was maybe 10, dropping as the game went on, which, to be fair, that was one of the coolest atmospheres I've ever experienced, both literally and figuratively, at a football game. I shot the game for the Hoosier Network, and that was incredible. 28 degrees at kickoff this time around in West Lafayette. Of course, the sun will be well gone, 7:30 p.m. kick at Ross-Ade Stadium. 28 degrees, temperature dropping throughout the game. We'll look at the wind as well. Of course, that was a big factor last year. It shouldn't be too much of an issue. Fortunately, this year, wind gusts up to a blazing 5 miles an hour. That's the preliminary forecast on Friday in West Lafayette, Indiana, as the Hoosiers look to keep the old Oaken Bucket in the 100th edition of this rivalry game, which Purdue has dominated for most of its existence. But as Curt Cignetti has proven time and time again he doesn't care about history. He's just going to set new records. He's going to beat Purdue 66-0 and not blink. Now, Cignetti laid the rat poison earlier this week. He said, Purdue is competitive at home. They played a tough schedule. I know their record isn't great. This is a lot better than the Purdue team we played last year. And, well, yeah, he's right, because that Purdue team that Indiana played last year, one of the worst Power 4 teams in the country. I think they were the worst Power 4 team in the country. They were one of the worst teams, Power 4 or not, anywhere in the FBS. So, yeah, this Purdue team is better, if nothing else, because they've won twice as many games as they won last year. They've won 2 games this year. But I love how Curt Cignetti makes every team sound like they're the 85 Bears when they're getting set to play Indiana. They're the 2007 Patriots when they play Indiana. That's called laying the rat poison. You compliment your opponent. You butter them up. But I think Purdue fans are seeing right through it. One of my favorite Purdue fans to follow on Twitter, Isaiah Walker, he said, oh no, Indiana hasn't scouted Purdue, in response to Cignetti saying that Purdue is a competitive football team. Which, yeah, that's how Purdue fans feel. They are in the position that IU fans had been in for so many years before Curt Cignetti came to town. Just counting the days they were until basketball season, and now they're fully focused on that. And to be fair, why wouldn't you be if you're a Purdue men's basketball fan? Not Purdue women's basketball. Not Purdue women's basketball, because I suspect that Katie Geralds will not be at the helm much longer in West Lafayette. But Purdue men's basketball, they're humming along. Just beat Texas Tech by 30. Beat Alabama on the road. Winning everywhere. So yeah, I'd be more focused on that too. Because this Friday in West Lafayette might be a bloodbath. And Indiana, I don't want to get lost. The fact that Indiana is 1 win away from going 12-0 and having a perfect regular season for the first time ever. As we have seen in college football this year, and in every year, not just this year. I don't want recency bias to creep in here. Every single year, there are teams that are talented enough to go undefeated that do not go undefeated. Because winning every single game in college football is really hard. It sounds cliche, but you hear it all the time. Any given Saturday, right? Any team could beat any other team. That's just how football goes. That's just how it goes. It's so hard to win every week. But Indiana is 1 week away from going 12-0, and that has never happened. And I don't want that to get lost. Obviously, Indiana has bigger, better aspirations than a 12-0 regular season. The players and coaches will tell you as much. Cignetti said when asked about Senior Day, Wisconsin, well, the players, we're not really thinking about the end right now. I think everybody understands what's possible and what we're trying to do here. And that would be not just winning a Big Ten championship, but winning a national championship as well. I mean, you think about Oregon. Oregon very well could have gone undefeated with all the talent that they have. And I know that win over Penn State looked really good at the time, and then Penn State fell off a cliff. By the way, Penn State yesterday against Nebraska. Remember when Matt Rule was rumored as the replacement for James Franklin? Yeah, no. Penn State fighting for bowl eligibility, improving to 5-6. They've won back-to-back Big Ten games, 37-10 over the Huskers last night in State College. Good for Terry Smith. Curt Cignetti said he has a lot of respect for Terry Smith, the interim head coach at Penn State. I know that Oregon win over Penn State looks a lot worse now than it did at the time. Oregon has so much talent, they very easily could have gone undefeated this season. But Indiana, less talent on paper, better coached. Disciplined. Smart, disciplined, poised. They're fast, physical, relentless. You hear it all the time. These players, not necessarily the highest rated recruits, but they are so well coached. And they keep the big picture in mind. But in order to achieve your ultimate goal, they've got to do the little things right. And that's what Curt Cignetti has preached. And that's what they do so well. That is what they do so well. That's one of the reasons why Indiana remains one of the last 3 unbeaten teams, is because of how well coached they are. So the Hoosiers getting set to head up to Ross-Ade Stadium. It'll be Curt Cignetti's first trip to Ross-Ade, and I'll tell you what, I think there's going to be a lot of IU fans there. Tickets are pretty cheap. Purdue fans don't want to watch a massacre. I think IU fans could take over Ross-Ade, and that would be a beautiful sight to see this coming Friday. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you inside the WGCL studios. And at the top of the first hour, I said I was glad the sun was in my face. Well, it's now retreated behind the clouds, which reminds me that once again, it is late November. Heisman odds update. Excuse me. I took a page out of the Sean McDonough School of Voice Cracks right there, but hopefully I don't have trouble with the snap. Fernando Mendoza, per FanDuel, minus 125 to win the Heisman Trophy. The next closest, Ohio State quarterback Julian Sayin at plus 380, followed by Jeremiah Love at plus 600. And Diego Pavia also plus 600, which is a capital O joke, by the way. See what I did there? You thought I was going to say capital J joke, but instead I said capital O. I thought that was funny. I think Jeremiah Love deserves much more Heisman consideration than Diego Pavia. I would say he deserves as much Heisman consideration as Julian Sayin, to be honest. I would. Jeremiah Love is unbelievable. He was phenomenal last year. He was the best running back in college football last year at Notre Dame. And I don't like Notre Dame. Let me make that perfectly clear. And I know you're going to say, oh, well, you went to a Catholic high school, so you should like Notre Dame because you have the same mascot. You wear the same football uniforms. There is a certain pretentiousness to most people associated with Notre Dame as a fan that I just can't get over. There's this certain elitist mindset. I don't like it. I do not like it. I heard from IU fans who went up to South Bend last year that was the worst visiting fan experience they've ever had at Notre Dame. What's really funny, too, is that most Notre Dame football fans, most Notre Dame football fans probably did not graduate from Notre Dame. But they act all high and mighty. I don't like that. I never have liked that. There's something about that that just rubs me the wrong way. Notre Dame's a great campus, but a lot of the fans are very annoying. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it like it is. And I understand if like you've got familial ties to South Bend or Chicago or whatever, and you grew up a Notre Dame fan and you went to IU or whatever, okay, fine. But I cannot stand the reverse jacket fans. Notre Dame fans went after reverse jacket fans last year. Those are fans who root for Notre Dame football and IU basketball. Pick a side. Pick a side. You don't just get to be a fair weather fan. I was born and raised an IU football fan, an IU basketball fan, an IU everything fan. Born and raised. I didn't choose to root for Notre Dame football just because they were good. I stuck it out. I thugged it out. I've been in the trenches, man. I was asking my dad who Richard Lego was when I was in like third grade. Pick a side. But anyway, I will give Jeremiah Love all the credit in the world because he is the best running back in college football. I realize Syracuse is a hospital squad and they were starting a lacrosse player at quarterback. The quarterback doesn't line up opposite the running back, though. Jeremiah Love had another ridiculous game yesterday. And this has kind of just become normal for him. Yesterday against Syracuse, 8 carries, 171 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He averaged 21.5 yards per carry, a long of 68. Notre Dame led Syracuse 21-0 before the offense even touched the ball yesterday. That is ridiculous. And I know Syracuse is bad, and their season has gone off the rails since Steve Angeli got hurt, their quarterback. But wow. Jeremiah Love against Pitt last week. 23 carries, 167 yards, and a touchdown. He has not had a game under 80 rushing yards since week 1 against Miami when Notre Dame lost in Coral Gables. Or excuse me, in Miami Gardens, not in Coral Gables. He is averaging 143 rushing yards per game. He's got 20 rushing touchdowns this season, does Jeremiah Love. He deserves to be a Heisman Trophy finalist over Diego Pavia. No question. No question. No question. And this is where Notre Dame not playing in a conference kind of hurts him. Because he could make a case, could Jeremiah Love, to win the Heisman in a conference championship game. But Notre Dame does not play a conference championship game. And to be fair, they got the full piece of the pie. They got the entire pie for making the national championship game last year as an independent. I think it was $20 million they got. Why would you want to share that? I know, I understand people say Notre Dame should join a conference, but from a monetary standpoint and from a brand building standpoint, it makes no sense. Because Ohio State had to divvy up that money among the other Big Ten member schools. Notre Dame got to keep all of it. If I was them, I would stay independent as well. You get to schedule terrible ACC teams and then your rivalry games, like against USC. But you don't have to split the money. You have your own cushy TV contract with NBC. Your brand stands alone on its own. It doesn't need a conference logo next to it. It's the perfect situation. But Fernando Mendoza is still the leading Heisman favorite. This is not gambling advice. Mendoza minus 125. Nobody else closer than plus 380. Julian Sayin, he played well against Rutgers yesterday. That's great. That's cool. Whatever. Ohio State blew him out. But he was not... I think it's important to recognize that Ohio State was without Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Sayin's top receiver was Max Clare, the former Purdue tight end. So, I think Ohio State only had one receiver actually catch a pass yesterday. It was Brandon Inniss. 2 catches for 10 yards and a touchdown. So, if Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate cannot get to 100%, what are they going to look like against Michigan in the Big House? Because that game could decide, it will decide who Indiana plays in the Big Ten Championship. Not could decide, it will. And as we know, Ohio State's struggles under Ryan Day against Michigan have been well documented. Hadn't beat Michigan since 2019. That game last year was one of the most puzzling outcomes I've ever seen. Knowing how much better Ohio State was than Michigan, at least on paper, knowing that game was played in Columbus, I was thinking there's no way that Michigan wins. What did they do? They won. They won. And then Ohio State fans, Ohio legislators, Ohio police officers were so hurt by it that an Ohio legislator, if memory serves me correctly, this was so absurd that I didn't believe it was true, but it was. An Ohio legislator tried to get the practice of visiting schools planting their flags on the field at Ohio Stadium. They tried to get that banned because they were so hurt by Michigan going into the shoe and winning. 13-10. Defensive battle. Quarterback Will Howard for the Buckeyes looked like he was playing with a concussion because I'm pretty sure he was playing with a concussion. Ohio State looked horrible offensively in that game. Jack Sawyer, the linebacker, who's now in the NFL, Jack Sawyer was so upset that he was, if I remember right, he was screaming at Michigan players. He was crashing out, to say the least, as the kids say. An Ohio police officer brought out the pepper spray against Michigan players, which is a very normal and rational thing to do. Hey, here's an idea, Buckeyes. If you don't like the players celebrating on your field, then win the game. It's kind of like how opposing fans sometimes complain, and wrongfully so, that Curt Cignetti runs up the score on teams. If you actually watch Indiana blow teams out, they don't run up the score. They get a comfortable lead. Usually it's around 30 or 40 points. And then they tell whoever's at quarterback, whether it's Fernando Mendoza or his brother, or Grant Wilson, they tell him to stop throwing the ball and hand it off every time. They intentionally try to end the game as fast as possible to avoid running up the score. And people are saying sometimes, like in the case of Illinois, or in the case of UCLA, oh, there goes Cignetti running up the score again. Hey, you don't like the opposing coach running up the score on you, stop him. Play defense. That's the best way to prevent a team from running up the score. That's what I'd say. If you don't like losing, then don't lose. Ain't that something? But don't get all sour. Don't try to prevent opposing teams from planting their flag at your 50-yard line. Don't try to prevent opposing teams from celebrating on your field but with legislation, or with pepper spray like Ohio State did last year. Prevent it by winning the freaking football game. That's the best way to do it. And I know it might sound crazy to some, but this Ohio State-Michigan game, I am so glad that Indiana plays on Friday night because I actually get to sit down and watch this game. Last year, I had to watch it on people's cell phones at tailgates here in Bloomington because we were getting ready for the Bucket game. I had to watch the watch the Ohio State-Michigan game on people's phones or on satellite TVs at tailgates. This year, I get to watch it just uninterrupted with plenty of commercials because it's Big Noon Kickoff and Fox hates fun. But it would not surprise me at all if Michigan beats Ohio State. And if they do, that is to Indiana's advantage because it means Ohio State does not make the Big Ten championship game. And it means that you could have a scenario where you have 3 one-loss teams in the Big Ten. None of them are Indiana, assuming Indiana beats Purdue, which, pretty safe assumption, but you never know. It's rivalry week. Anything can happen. And I'm not... This is why Curt Cignetti talks up every opponent of Indiana like they're the 85 Bears. Because he knows, he attacks complacency. He knows if you get complacent, it can hurt you. If Indiana loses to Purdue, which mathematically is possible, if Indiana loses to Purdue, they don't make the Big Ten championship. They probably don't get a bye in the playoff. Don't just assume that Indiana is going to beat Purdue. Purdue, on paper, has nothing to play for except to ruin Indiana's perfect regular season, which to them is a lot because it's a rivalry, and rivalries, thankfully, still mean something in college football. But there is a scenario where Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan could all be one-loss teams in Big Ten play. Michigan blew out Maryland yesterday at Secu Stadium. Maryland once again said it was a sellout. It was not. Oregon handled USC and gets to go on the road to Seattle and play Washington. That could be an interesting game. Washington at 8-3, they kind of had an outside shot at the CFP and then lost to Wisconsin, and those dreams went by the wayside. That could be a chaotic game as well. But with the way Oregon handled USC yesterday, I think Oregon finds a way to win in Seattle. But that Oregon-Washington rivalry, I was kind of formally introduced to it when Bo Nix and Michael Penix faced off in the final years of the Pac-12. That's going to be a good game. I feel like yesterday, Oregon-USC, kind of an old-school Pac-12 style game. A lot of offense, no defense. It's fun. It's fun football. And I'm glad that we at least kept some semblance of those Pac-12 rivalries. But if there are 3 one-loss teams in the Big Ten, then things get really messy. I believe Michigan, I think Michigan would have the tiebreaker. I'm not entirely sure. We can go through all the scenarios here in a little bit, but it would either be Michigan or Oregon. And I know Oregon wants a rematch with Indiana. I think that would be a really good game. I don't know if Indiana could beat Oregon twice. Oregon has a lot of talent, as we know. And I think Dan Lanning and Dante Moore, the Oregon quarterback, are going to learn, and did learn, a lot from losing to Indiana at Autzen. The advantage that Indiana would have, obviously, with the Big Ten Championship being played at Lucas Oil Stadium, about 45 miles from here in Bloomington, IU fans. Much easier to get to Indianapolis from within the state of Indiana than it is from the West Coast. Trust me, I know I did that trip. It is long. It is expensive, although I didn't pay for it. The media school did. That's a really long trip. Oregon fans traveled well last year when they played Penn State in the Big Ten title game. But I'd expect that atmosphere to be a lot more in Indiana's favor. What I don't know that Dante Moore is going to look as shaky as he did the first time around against Indiana. He did not look like himself. Bryant Haynes, a masterful defensive scheme, kept Dante Moore off balance, out of rhythm that entire game. Remember, Oregon only scored 1 offensive touchdown against Indiana. But I didn't feel confident about Indiana going into Autzen and winning before it happened. I was shocked by it, to be honest with you, because Indiana had never won a game of that magnitude on the road before. Certainly not under Curt Cignetti. That was like the one thing Indiana was missing under Cignetti. And then they did it. But part of me just thinks that Oregon would have the edge in a rematch. I don't know why. That's just what my gut tells me. But my gut has been wrong this year. My gut said Indiana might lose to Illinois and Oregon. I was wrong. My gut said Indiana was going to lose to Penn State. I was almost right. But Indiana fans, happy to prove me wrong there. Happy to rub my face in the dirt and say, ha, told you so, never daunted. I was daunted watching that Indiana-Penn State game. It's the only game I haven't covered in person this year. But bottom line, if you're Indiana, you can clinch a spot in the Big Ten Championship, just win. There were some clinching scenarios yesterday for Indiana, but you never want to leave your fate in the hands of other teams. And the best way to do that is just to keep winning. Indiana's done a pretty good job of that. 11-0 this year. Ohio State going into the Big House, noon on Saturday. By then, we'll know. We'll know whether or not Indiana's in because Indiana plays on Friday night. But there is a scenario where Indiana could play either Ohio State, Oregon, or Michigan in the Big Ten title game. And we'll know this time next week. And it's going to be really fun. December 6th, Lucas Oil Stadium. That is in 13 days. 13 days. And oh, by the way, on the same day, Indiana basketball plays Louisville at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. There is going to be a lot of cream and crimson in downtown Indy in early December, and it is going to be a really, really fun way to usher in the holiday season. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I can't believe football season, well, I would say it's almost over because that used to be the case. Now it feels like it's only just beginning because, well, if you ask Indiana, I'm sure they'll tell you the real season begins on December 6th in the Big Ten Championship game. Assuming Indiana beats Purdue, that's where they'll be. I'll have the call for WIUX Student Radio. I can't believe it. I'm going to call a Big Ten Football Championship game on 99.1 WIUX. That is pretty cool. Pretty cool. An honor and a privilege to be part of the broadcast crew for that game. Assuming Indiana gets there, of course. If it's Ohio State and somebody else or Michigan and somebody else, I won't be there. But assuming Indiana does what it's supposed to do, I'll be there. And that is going to be really fun. But first, Indiana has to win the 100th installment of the Old Oaken Bucket game, which Curt Cignetti 66-0 over Purdue last year. This Purdue team is better, but again, that's not saying much because they were the worst Power 4 team in the country last year. So the only way to go was up, and somehow Purdue has barely managed to do that. I'll be shooting the bucket game once again at Ross-Ade, and I've been to Ross-Ade a few times over the last handful of years. It's okay. Nothing to write home about. The atmosphere kind of sucks, to be honest. Actually, if you look, tickets are under $70 right now, and they were going for, I think, $65 on Vivid Seats. We'll look at Indiana right now on TickPick, which is what I use. And the bucket game, it's actually, you got to go to Purdue because it is a Purdue home game. A lot of fans trying to sell their tickets. I mean, if you look at this seating chart, there are tickets available in pretty much every section, it looks like. And you can get into the stadium for under $100, which is, yeah. Purdue fans like to peacock about how they show up no matter how good or bad their team is. And that's just not true. I think they know that this is going to be really ugly. I mean, there are tickets close to the Indiana sideline for about $90 for a chance to see Indiana go 12-0. I'd take that. I would take that any day of the week. I think there is going to be a lot of cream and crimson at Ross-Ade Stadium. Purdue students out of town still for Thanksgiving, and they're not going to come back for this game. Are you kidding me? Probably the only students who are going to be there after the second quarter, the band. That's it. That's my guess anyway. I don't have any scientific evidence to back that up other than my own personal experience going to Ross-Ade and watching the Purdue students go from chanting IU sucks to chanting Fire Walters when Purdue played Penn State last year. So I have no sympathy for Purdue getting blown out again, assuming that's what happens this Friday, because their students chant IU sucks when IU is not in the stadium, when IU is not their competition. It's very strange. Very strange behavior. They do it. Not saying it's right or wrong. I just think it's little brother behavior. I think it's inferior behavior because IU fans don't think about Purdue like that. But Purdue fans think about IU all the time, thinking, man, I wish I had a Curt Cignetti in West Lafayette. You don't. You got Barry Odom. Congrats, I guess. He has to build from the ground up. And Curt Cignetti looks over his shoulder and says, what, like it's hard? Building from the ground up? He is the exception, not the rule. And I had somebody on Twitter, which is, as we know, the great mediator of public discourse as far as sports go. I had somebody on Twitter tell me to calm down after saying that IU basketball's win over Lindenwood was the most unconvincing 20-point win I've ever seen. Indiana won 73-53, but was out-rebounded by Lindenwood and once again shot under 35% from three-point range. And somebody told me, well, Curt Cignetti, his turnaround wasn't normal. And we can't just expect Darren DeVries to lead this team to a national title in his first year. You got to keep your expectations down. When did I ever say that I expected that? I didn't, first of all. I didn't say that. I never said, I think Darren DeVries is going to be Curt Cignetti for IU basketball. I sure hope he leads them to a Big Ten title and takes them to a top 4 NCAA tournament. No, I never said that. How long have you been watching IU basketball? Are you new to this? No. I never ever said that. I never ever said I expected Darren DeVries to be Curt Cignetti. I said the energy concerns Indiana men's basketball, back-to-back games against inferior opponents, and you just come out flat. By your own admission, Tucker DeVries said after the game they came out flat. That's concerning. Getting out-rebounded by Lindenwood is concerning. Chucking up shots. Poor shot selection. It's fine if you're taking good shots and you're missing because you're getting good looks. A lot of these looks weren't even that good. Just chucking it up for the sake of it. Just cause. That's not good basketball. This team, one of my favorite replies. What you're missing is that this is a game, Indiana Lindenwood, talking about, this is a game that Lindenwood actually rallied a little bit. At the start of the second half, they went on a 10-0 run to cut the deficit to single digits. And people are trying to excuse it or justify it by saying that this is a game that a Mike Woodson coach team would lose. Well, I'll go back to old reliable here. If I had 2 wheels, I'd be a bicycle. I don't have 2 wheels. I'm not a bicycle. Maybe this is a game that a Mike Woodson coached team loses. What you're missing is this is a game we lose instead of winning by 20 in the Woodson, Galloway, Leal, TikTok years. We won an awfully played game by 20. Baby steps. DeVries is building something. What Cignetti is doing is is an aberration. Can't lose sight that we won a bad game by 20. I never compared Darren DeVries to Curt Cignetti. That's comparing apples and asparagus. There is nothing in common. Nothing in common at all. It's a very flawed mindset. I never said that Darren DeVries is going to be Curt Cignetti. I just said that I was very unconvinced by a 20-point win, which is kind of strange. I know that Mike Woodson coached teams struggled in bye games the last couple years of his tenure. Florida Gulf Coast, Army, Wright State, UNC Greensboro, just to name a few. I know that. I watched those games. But expecting a high level of effort regardless of the opponent, I don't think is too lofty of any sort of standard, because that is something that Darren DeVries preached. He preaches that they're going to play with high effort, high intensity, unselfishness at all times. And the last couple games, they haven't done that. And they've been able to get away with it because, fortunately, Lindenwood and Incarnate Word struggled to score. Lindenwood was terrible shooting the basketball. They took 67 shots and made just 17 of them. That's 25% from the floor. They took 18 threes and made 3 of them. That's 17%. If they made a couple more threes, again, if I had 2 wheels, I'd be a bicycle. If Lindenwood had any semblance of shot making, they could have made Indiana pay for a lack of effort. Kansas State has a semblance of shot making. Kansas State coming to Assembly Hall on Tuesday. Very fortunate for Indiana that they got the weekend off. They get to iron some of these things out. They have more of an opportunity to do so. But Kansas State coming in, averaging 93 points per game through 6 games. Led by a preseason All-American, P.J. Haggerty, averaging 28 points a game. Indiana was averaging 99 points per game through its first 3, and the Hoosiers have since kind of come back down to earth in that respect. Indiana averaging 88 points per game. But the median scoring, I think, will tell you a little bit more of the story, because averages through 6 games in basketball not necessarily a large enough sample size to give you a good picture. Indiana's median scoring this year actually is 98 against Alabama A&M. But the last two games, Indiana has struggled to get to 65 points because the shots are not falling. And I think Kansas State is also a team that gives up a lot of points. I mean, you look at their, like I said, yesterday against Nebraska, 86-85 in the Hall of Fame Classic. Kansas State lost that game by 1 point. They gave up 77 to Mississippi State, but they scored 98. They gave up 83 to Tulsa, but they scored 84. Gave up 96 to Cal, but they scored 99. Then they played staunch defense against lesser opponents like UNC Greensboro and Bellarmine, holding them each to under 75 points while scoring over 93. This is a Kansas State team that can rain down buckets as well as, if not better than, Indiana. So you are going to need more intensity on the glass. You're going to need better shot selection. If Lamar Wilkerson is going to go through a slump, which everybody does, everybody goes through slumps. If he's going to go through slumps, then you're going to need somebody else to pick up the slack as far as scoring goes. Tucker DeVries can be that guy. He was that guy against Lindenwood. He was that guy against Marquette before Wilkerson heated up in the second half. Well, DeVries had 24 points in the first half against Marquette when Indiana got into foul trouble and Reed Bailey had to go to the bench. I think you might have to lean on somebody like Sam Alexis again. Sam Alexis, phenomenal. Phenomenal off the bench for Indiana. And like I said in the first hour, I would not be surprised if Sam Alexis starts. 6'9" forward out of Florida. Spent 2 years at Chattanooga before that. Was first team all defense when he was at Chattanooga. And he's incredible. He had 4 blocks against Lindenwood. His intensity has been the one good thing about these last couple games for Indiana. When the rest of the team comes out flat, Sam Alexis is just giving his all every second he's on the floor. And Tucker DeVries has said it in one way or another the last couple games. I don't know if without Sam Alexis, I don't think we win this game. He said that about each of the last two. So that's the power of Sam Alexis being that difference maker. And good on him, but you're going to need somebody else as well to pick up the slack. If he's going to split minutes with Reed Bailey, which I think if Darren DeVries is smart, he has Alexis on the floor for 26, 27 minutes a game instead of 15 or 20 as it's been. Alexis has earned the right to play more. But when Reed Bailey's out there, I mean, you're talking about a 6'10" guy who's averaging 4 rebounds a game. That's less production than I think you'd like. You don't want to chuck up threes early in the shot clock. Try to get the ball. Maybe they try to get the ball down low to Sam Alexis a little bit more. Not just on dunks, but in the post. Let him back down his defender because he seems to be the most physical player that they have right now. But it's very one-dimensional, and that's what I'm concerned about with Kansas State. And early in the season, you'd rather have these struggles now than in January or February because it gives you plenty of time to learn from it and adjust. And Darren DeVries is a great coach. He's won everywhere he's been. So successful at Drake, and he took West Virginia out of the dumpster last year and nearly brought them to the NCAA tournament. He's got the wherewithal to get it done. This is a veteran group, and I fully expect them to adjust and learn from what's happened the last couple of games and be better moving forward. Kansas State will be a great litmus test for that Tuesday night at Assembly Hall. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. Football in Bloomington this weekend. It will be played. No, I'm not talking about American football. I'm talking about soccer. And Indiana men's soccer opening NCAA tournament play today against a very familiar opponent, the St. Louis Billikens. These two programs have combined for 18 national championships. St. Louis, though, 10 titles, hasn't won a national championship since 1973. And that year, 1973, might sound familiar to Indiana men's soccer fans because that is the year that IU made men's soccer a varsity sport. IU has won 8 national titles since 1973, the most of any team in that span. The Hoosiers have beaten St. Louis 25 times in the all-time series, and Indiana has hosted the Billikens 5 times in the NCAA tournament, winning every single meeting. Going for number 6 today, Indiana facing St. Louis in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2022 when Ryan Wittenbrink lifted the Hoosiers to a 1-0 victory, as the Hoosiers would ultimately advance to the College Cup and fall to Syracuse in the national championship game. A game that I watched live at, of all places, Memorial Stadium. There was a watch party that the Student Athletic Board hosted. I went because there was free pizza, and I was a freshman who didn't know many people. So we watched Indiana men's soccer from, I believe it was a north end zone suite at Memorial Stadium. They had some helmets sitting around in there, and Memorial Stadium had just hosted a 4-8 Indiana football season. Well, things have changed a lot since then, but Indiana men's soccer remains excellent as always. And of course, we talked about them a little bit in the first hour, but Paul Muralt probably will win the Mac Hermann Trophy, which is the trophy given to the top men's college soccer player. 42 points leads the NCAA. He's got 16 of Indiana's 46 goals. He has been unbelievable this season. Paul Muralt, 42 points. No other Indiana player has more than 14. The Butler transfer, the best player in the country. I'm pretty sure that's a pretty open and shut debate. Paul Muralt. Indiana, there was some concern, I think, that Indiana peaked a little too early. You think about the non-conference schedule. Indiana went undefeated in the non-con. A tie against Clemson, a come-from-behind tie on opening night. That was back in late August. A win over San Francisco, also come from behind. Commanding ranked wins over Oregon State, over St. Louis. Notre Dame unranked, but Indiana went on the road and beat the Fighting Irish. That is always a good game. Indiana-Notre Dame in men's soccer, phenomenal. The non-conference slate had you feeling good. And then Indiana got upset by Michigan. Michigan ended up actually being pretty good this year. They made the Big Ten championship game. So they ended up being really good. But the puzzling losses in the non-conference slate, which we didn't really touch on that much on this show, but it was confusing. Indiana lost on the road against Michigan State. On the road, got blown out by Washington. 3-0. Didn't even look competitive. Very confusing. Lost to Maryland in a close one. And then this was probably the worst one of all. Halloween night in Evanston. Shut out by Northwestern. That was strange. That was really strange. And that marked the first time in 12 years that Indiana had lost back-to-back matches. Think about that for a second. Indiana went over a decade without losing back-to-back men's soccer matches. That is insane. That is how good this program is. And that's why, 5-5 in Big Ten play, you consider that kind of underwhelming. But that is because of how good they have been for so long. 50 NCAA tournament appearances. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Questing for that 9th star, the 9th national championship. Indiana finished the regular season 12-5-1. No Big Ten tournament appearance, which was strange. Because decision day, the final day of the regular season this past year, when Indiana blew out Rutgers 4-0, that was the first time since 2017 that Indiana was not either already a Big Ten champion or in position to clinch a Big Ten title. First time in 8 years that on the last day of the regular season, Indiana did not have a chance to win the Big Ten title. That's how good this program has been. There are so many different ways to quantify it, but no matter how you slice it, Indiana men's soccer is always a threat. Always a threat. So, they begin NCAA tournament play today at noon against the St. Louis Billikens. That game is at Bill Armstrong Stadium, and it'll be broadcast on ESPN Plus, not Big Ten Plus, ESPN Plus, because ESPN has the rights to the entire men's soccer tournament. So you look at Indiana's side of the bracket. St. Louis knocked out Kentucky in overtime. Here in Bloomington on Thursday, it was double overtime. St. Louis trailed until the final 10 minutes of action. It's golden goal in overtime throughout the men's soccer tournament. So after 90 minutes, if you can't settle things, you go to OT, and whoever scores first wins. That's it. Bryant, the 11th seed, is on the other side of the bracket facing Seton Hall tonight at 6. So if Indiana takes down St. Louis, the Hoosiers will host Bryant or Seton Hall, whoever wins that game. Indiana will host Bryant coming up next in NCAA tournament play. On the other side, Indiana has a chance to play either Akron. Akron's always a good team. Notre Dame, third-seeded Princeton, or Duke. Feels like Indiana, Notre Dame Maybe another rematch there. You think back a couple years ago, Indiana got bounced by Notre Dame on penalty kicks in South Bend in the NCAA tournament. But Notre Dame took down Michigan in the opening round. Notre Dame will face 14th-seeded Akron today at 1 o'clock, and then 3rd-seeded Princeton takes on Duke. So whoever makes it out of that side of the bracket will face most likely Indiana or Bryant, Seton Hall, or St. Louis. On the other side of the bracket, across, this is a team Indiana would not face until the College Cup, until the quarterfinals, I should say. Vermont, the top overall seed. Denver facing Portland. These are other teams that Indiana wouldn't see until later, but other Big Ten teams still in the NCAA tournament. Washington beat Oregon State in double overtime. Classic Pac-12 rivalry there. Maryland made it. They will face North Carolina later today. Marshall still in it. You think about Marshall, of course, beating Indiana in the 2020 season. So the Big Ten, well represented. Well represented. Indiana, of course, carrying the torch as always, but UCLA got upset in penalty kicks. So the Bruins season came to an end, but plenty of Big Ten teams with their fingerprints on this NCAA tournament. Indiana, though, in position to host this round. Obviously, they're hosting today. And to host the next round, if they win, they'll get the winner of Bryant Seton Hall if they can take care of St. Louis this afternoon at 12 o'clock. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. We'll check the ESPN FPI because I like seeing Indiana at the top. That's ESPN's proprietary analytical model, which basically tells you how good and college football team is on paper. Indiana remains steady at number 2 after winning the bye week by a final score of 70-0. Purdue actually lost to their bye week a couple weeks ago, which was kind of curious. Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, Notre Dame up to 3 after beating the ever-loving daylights out of Syracuse yesterday, putting up 70 points on the Orange. I wonder how the Syracuse students felt calling that game. I'm sure they loved it. Up in South Bend, Notre Dame at 3, Oregon at 4, Alabama at 5. The ESPN FPI gives Indiana a 23% chance to win the national championship. Curiously, Indiana has a 99.6 chance to make the playoff, 99.6%, which is not 100%, which is strange. Ohio State at 100%, not surprising. Notre Dame only a 72.5% chance. I feel like they're in. Indiana remains at number 2 in strength of record, which indicates that Indiana would Indiana having this record or better is not at all a fluke. It means Indiana's actually pretty freaking good at what they do. Indiana's second in overall efficiency behind just Ohio State. The Hoosiers third in defensive efficiency and 5th in offensive efficiency. So Indiana still standing pat, not that I expected anything otherwise. The Hoosiers and Ohio State on a collision course to meet in the Big Ten championship game. But again, Ohio State has to handle Michigan. And I don't think anybody, I don't even think most people in Columbus think Ohio State's going to win this game. Because, again, it's cliche, I know. But in a rivalry game, you tend to throw all the stats, all the history in that season out the window. Because it's a rivalry. And as we saw last year, a down-year Michigan team can beat Ohio State on the road. So I don't think it's surprising. I don't think you'd be very surprised at all if, say, College Game Day, they put out their picks for that game for Ohio State, Michigan at the Big House. I don't think anybody would be surprised if the majority of the College Game Day crew picks Michigan. I really wouldn't be shocked. I know Julian Saint's a better quarterback than Will Howard. I know Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate have another year under their belt. I don't even know if they're going to be healthy. They both missed yesterday against Rutgers. And Julian Saint did not put up his usual numbers. I know he didn't play the whole game. He didn't have to play the whole game. But it's interesting. It's something to keep an eye on. Ohio State, on one hand, you want to save them, make sure they're good for the Big Ten championship. But first, you have to get to the Big Ten championship. And if you lose to Michigan, you're not in. Because Michigan has the tiebreaker over you in the head-to-head. Good thing Indiana's not in that situation, huh? Although I know a lot of IU fans, a lot of IU players, Kurt Cignetti, I'm sure, would love another shot at Ohio State after what happened last year. That's going to do it for IU Sports Sunday this week. Big one for the Colts here on WGCL. They take on the Chiefs from Arrowhead Stadium. Coverage begins here at noon, kickoff at 1 o'clock. That is going to be a big one. Kind of a down year for the Chiefs. They're on the verge of not just losing their division, but maybe even missing the playoffs. And the Colts can further make their case as the best team in the AFC with a win on the road in Kansas City. Remember, when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl a couple years ago, the Colts beat them in the regular season. Just something to think about. Maybe the Colts have Patrick Mahomes' number. We will see at 1 o'clock today. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL.